So, hello everyone. My name is Victoria, and today I will be hosting this MA session. So, let me introduce. Today we have Jeff McCabe. He is the founder of Lightning Works, and we have Sergey Gribnik, who is head of research for Waterfall Network. So, my first question is addressed to Jeff. What inspired the creation of Starblind, and what can readers expect from its story and characters?
Yeah, so I've been interested in storytelling for years. When I was a kid, my mom was a poet, and she would take me around the world and introduce me to family members. And one of the things that I remember is my great grandfather in Mexico, who we would visit every summer and sometimes in Christmas. He would always tell stories about his youth in the, late 1800s and early 1900s, and he would have us spellbind, telling us about pirates and treasures and shark attacks and all this kind of stuff that kids love to hear about. And he was really good at it. And he wrote a book eventually, which I ended up reading. But it really impressed me that my mom was so focused on the written word and storytelling. And she used to tell me, before TV, being able to tell a story was really important in culture. And she said, and she would always say, Jeff, your grandfather, your great grandfather were all really good storytellers, and it was an important skill to have in culture. And if you could tell stories well, then people would gain a sense of respect, and it was part of being a good leader and a good, maybe a head of a family as well. So I always grew up with this idea that stories are really important and was very fascinated about them. So my mother was always writing, and as a kid, I really fell in love with comics like a lot of kids do. And at first I started reading like Richie Rich and Archie and Veronica and these kind of things, Donald Duck. But eventually I got more into the superhero stuff, especially X-Men and Batman. And so it was always kind of a dream to write comics. Like I think a lot of kids have that same dream. And so when blockchain came around and I heard about NFTs in 2017, I was working as the head of Divi, which is a layer one that did an ICO in 2017. I was working with Daniel Kraft, and at that time he was an engineer at Google who was secretly working in NFTs as the head of development for Namecoin. Namecoin released the first NFT on blockchain, and so he was the world expert in NFTs. And I worked with him, and we realized early on that comics could be done with blockchain. And so when I met Sergey a few years after that, I became very interested in his concept for Waterfall. And I realized that if we really wanted to do comics on the blockchain, we're talking about very large numbers, right? Like people buy millions and millions of comics. And with Webtoons, there's like over 1 million creators. So you can imagine the volume that's required. And so Waterfall is one of the only, or maybe the only, blockchain that's really capable of handling this volume of non-fungible tokens that we would use to represent digital comic book ownership on a grand global scale. So I was always very interested in that early on, and so after Waterfall launched, I was very excited to be able to do comics for it. So we've been working on comics for a while, and Starblind in specific is done in partnership with Alien Worlds. And Alien Worlds for a couple of years was the top play-to-earn game in the world. And they wanted somebody to be able to tell their story that's based around this sort of technical layer one block, or sort of a layer two blockchain-based value structure that they created that's unique within this world and within the Earth, basically. And so I decided to sort of take on the challenge. They hired me to do it with a series of grants. So we've been given grants to create the stories. And the idea is basically telling the story of Alien Worlds through a trilogy of movies. So you can think of it as like Star Wars was able to generate a lot of fans because it had a really great movie series. It was 3 movies. That takes about 12 to 20 comic books to tell that entire story of the first 3 movies, but it's enough to get people really excited about a universe. So I basically have done that for Alien Worlds, and we've released and we're releasing now the very first of that series, and we have 2 more comic books almost ready and finished as well that aren't released yet. But what we're releasing with Starblind is the first comic book. It's actually a double issue. It's more than 40 pages plus other pages of extra information to sort of flesh out the universe with the characters and stories about it. So I'm actually doing cosplay right now for one of the characters named Ash. I actually designed Ash to be played by Keanu Reeves in the movie. So I made the character look like him. And I actually used to know him, and he hired me to go down to Costa Rica and build a yoga center for his girlfriend at the time. This is 20 years ago. And so I've been kind of making this whole series with him in mind to play the leading role when we get it made into a movie. So that's kind of the background behind Starblind. Now, I'm not promising Keanu's actually going to do it, but it's the kind of thing that he loves. He loves comic books, and I do have a connection with him because I've been to his house, and so if I have it, so I think there's a pretty good shot. At least I can get it in front of him. So yeah, I can talk about to answer more questions.
Well, I believe yes, and that's really an impressive and long story. And what makes Starblind stand out from traditional and Web3 comics?
So Web3 comics aren't really a thing. Like, people have made them, but none of them that I've seen have really been good. They just haven't been good. I mean, it's really hard to do a good comic book. It's hard when you do it yourself. It's hard to know whether your own comics are good. You have to show them to a lot of people. People that have looked at the comic books that I've done that love comics have said they're really good. And it's part of, usually a comic gets made in a month, right? Well, I've taken like 3 years to do these comics with revisions and stuff. So we really put a lot of time into them to make sure that they're good. So there are Web3 comic books out there, but nobody's been successful. And that's been part of our problem as a company, is that when I go to venture capitalists or the layer ones, everyone wants to see traction. They want to see users, and they want to see not just a great comic book and good stories and good characters, which I've really focused on, but the delivery method needs to work. They need to know that people want to actually buy comics in this way. People used to buy them as paper. Now people go to Webtoons, they get them for free and just scroll vertically. There's all these different delivery methods, right? Web3 has not found the right way to do that yet. And so that's what people want to see, because that's what they want to fund, at least in Web3. So we've been working on that entire method as well. So most of our money is actually not gone into the comics, but the effort has gone into creating the method of delivery. So our Web3 comics are different than others in that they're interactive and they're animated and they're bigger and there's just a lot more to them. And part of the problem with starting a new comic book is that people are very interested in the things that they already love. They love Batman, X-Men, Superman, or whatever it is. It's their favorite. And they really just want more of that. And so it's hard to get them to pay attention to something else, because when they go and read a first issue of a comic, and they don't know the characters, they don't know the universe. Most people don't know how to create the right set of hooks that get people sort of hooked into it, wanting to know more. And it's very difficult to do with a single comic. And that's why I've been spending a lot of time and money on making these first issues really exciting and good, so that when people get that comic, it's not just a single issue, but it's 2 or it's 3 put together, which gives more time for them to get to know the characters. We can create more characters, and we can have, villains and set up a lot of mysteries that get people hooked into wanting to know what's going to happen, while still getting to have, a few fight scenes and a bunch of things that, we know people love that read comic books. And so we've learned a lot from manga as well. Manga storytelling is a little bit different. It's more emotional in many ways, and they tell the hero's journey really well, of sort of taking people from the beginning to the end and getting people very interested to see these people win, because in the beginning they're not necessarily seen as winners. You'll probably notice that very early on in most character creation cycles, the characters don't win right away. People don't like that, right? People like to see characters that they connect with, because they're failing early on, and they want to see those characters grow through time. And if you try to just jump into characters being really, really powerful or always winning, then it's not necessarily interesting unless there's a reason for that to other reasons to make that interesting. So like you'll see with Starblind, we set up a lot of mysteries with a lot of different characters that hopefully will get people hooked into wanting to know who they are and what's going to happen to them. So with Web3, I would say, going back to your original question, the real thing that sets the comic apart is that we've really put a tremendous amount of money, time, and thought into what we're doing. And it's not, and it has to do with the stories and the characters, and also the technology. Our comics are made with HTML5, so it's not just a JPEG. There's movement, there's interaction, there's Easter eggs. So when you actually read through the comic, you can click different places, things will appear. They're very exciting, they're interesting, and I think that's important for the future of Web3 comics. You can't just take a JPEG and just stick it on the blockchain. People have tried that and it doesn't work. There's too much competition right now. You're competing when you're doing a comic book, you're not just competing with comics, you're competing with every other type of entertainment. And things like TikTok or YouTube are so addicting. You could just sit there all day and just scroll through this stuff. Why do you need anything else when they've got these AI algorithms that have figured out exactly how to hook into your brain and just keep you sort of scrolling, right? And there's so many different types of entertainment. News is entertainment. You have to compete with all of that now. And in the old days, like when I was a kid, you didn't have to worry about that because comics were a thing, and kids love to go to the comic book store or even just the grocery store and just get a few comics and bring them home, and you'd read them over and over. And TV was boring. When I was a kid, there was only 3 channels, and very rarely was there anything on there that I wanted to watch because they only could show one thing at a time. And they had this giant diverse market of everybody in the United States. Eventually they came out with cable and then the internet, and now there's Netflix, and you can have anything you want all the time. So comics in many ways as an art form are dying, and all the different companies are struggling to try to find a new way to make them work. So in our case, we've really thought deeply about what we're doing and looking at different models from Netflix and Webtoons, looking at manga to try to think about how we can do this. We know people want to interact. We know what people fans want to interact with each other. So the format we're developing eventually will have ways to socially interact. So you can think of it like if you're a crypto person and you're watching this, you can think about what has been attempted to be done like by CoinMarketCap, where you look at the coin, but on the side you have a squawk box where people are making comments. So that kind of thing built into the comics is where this needs to go in order to get people interested. And I'm fortunate that I have 2 daughters. One of them's 10 and one of them's 19, and they're both into this stuff. They love manga. They prefer manga over, anime and manga. They prefer it over like American style comic books. And when I ask them when I watch how they interact, when I ask them how they want to interact, they're very interested in interacting with other people that love the stuff they love. So, for example, if somebody really loves comics, they may find Starblind and they love the series, but not many people know about it yet. So they want to find other people that are interested in Starblind and want to talk to them about what's going to happen. Now, what we see right now, because this is Web3, is that people, when we first started Lightning Works, everybody was talking about the token and people are talking about speculation. NFTs made this whole thing into something about speculation as opposed to quality art or quality storytelling. So we're trying to have to reset the entire way that the market thinks about NFTs, tokens, entertainment, and all this, so that people can basically do both at the same time. We know people want to speculate. We know people want to buy these sort of first issue comics because they can go up in value, not just because of Bored Apes, but also because there's comic books that sell for millions of dollars. So people come in and they think, oh, wouldn't it be cool? I can buy this first comic, this first Starblind. Maybe it'll be worth $1 million someday, So, we have to be careful with what we say and how we say it, what we promise, talking about future value. We can't promise anything. So, but we know that's there, and it's okay to talk about the reality of the situation, that comics are a digital collectible, and digital collectibles are not money. Digital collectibles are, as NFTs, are not securities. So as long as we do the things right, people can basically have fun with these NFTs that they own that are comics and the other sort of versions of that we're doing. But at the same time, they can have fun with the speculative aspect as well.
Okay, thank you so much. I believe you already answered to my next question about speculative value. But anyway, I want to ask you, how does Starblind merge storytelling with technology, and why is that important for the future of digital media?
Yeah, I sort of answered that too. The thing that it's important to realize here is you can't just take a paper comic, scan the pages, put it on the blockchain as an NFT, and expect people to like it. Web3 has its own characteristics that make it what it is. And so comics need to be rethought from the ground up for the Web3 environment. It's not just digital, but it's also Web3, right? The being able to own a digital collectible is very interesting to people. But people have a hard time wrapping their minds around digital ownership sometimes, because people are used to doing things like just buying subscriptions where it's all you can consume, or it's something where you don't own a single thing, or if you buy it, you don't really own it because you can't resell it. Like, that's the way people are used to consuming comics right now in the digital world. They generally will go and they'll buy it, but they can't resell it, right? And people have accepted that as the reality. So doing it for Web3 is a humongous advantage to comic ownership, but the digital world of comics is just not doing this yet. Amazon has kind of started to dabble into it. It hasn't worked with it. And actually, I talked extensively with the head of Comixology who created it, and he told me all the problems of why it's difficult. And he was skeptical. He was actually skeptical that it would ever work, but he wasn't a Web3 person. He didn't really understand NFTs and what the technology is. So many people in the comic book world looked at NFTs, and then they got so turned off by Bored Apes and all of this crap, all this sort of crappy stuff, and the way it was pitched and the way it was, all these rug pulls. People are not interested in that stuff. People that love comics, they love the comics. They love the stories and the characters, and they fall in love with them when they're young, and they stick with them their whole lives because these characters become something like a family member or sort of like a pet in your sort of mind space. It becomes something that you really care about because it affected you and inspired you when you were young. And so this world of comics is nothing. It's the opposite of Bored Apes. It's kind of like there's a lot of substance there that where people really deeply care about the IP, the stories and the intellectual property that revolves around these characters, really, really valuable in people's mind space. And if you get somebody hooked on your character, they will love that character their whole life, and they can spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars over time and even devote their entire lives around it. I mean, there's so many people that when I was younger, people were Trekkies, right? They loved Star Trek. And then they got into Star Wars. It became really popular. And then Disney bought it and kind of ruined it. So people don't care much about Star Wars anymore. But now for kids, they're into the anime and the manga. So that's kind of where you want to be, and trying to figure out how to do that in the digital space is very different than doing digital and Web3. So Web3 characteristics are what we look at deeply, and how can we use Web3 to make the comic books better and interesting. And we've done that, but then we run into this wall of comic book people that they hear the word NFT and they just want to run away with it. And there's many like comic book people that just absolutely hate NFTs. But when you look at them, you look at what they say about it, they really don't understand it. They don't know anything about it. But that's how bad the brand of NFT has been ruined by this sort of low quality rug pull degen concept that is such a huge turnoff to mainstream. So with Waterfall, I feel like we have a sort of a way to turn that around, because Waterfall can really deliver the large volume, very, very low gas fees. We can do things with Waterfall, like if you do a big promotion and give away like 1 million comics or something in a day, on your TV show or whatever that's out there, Waterfall is maybe the only chain in the world that can handle the kind of volume that will come in because of the massive number of nodes and the way the DAG works. Any other blockchain is going to collapse when mainstream does anything. that's really fun. Like imagine if, a digital comic book tried to launch as an NFT in a Super Bowl ad or something, and all of a sudden 1 million people try to do it at once. Waterfall can handle that type of volume, and there's no other chain that can. So in mainstream, people know that blockchain is just sort of not ready. So this is kind of an argument against it. One of the people on our team was the head of market, head of, I guess it was licensing, head of licensing for Marvel Comics for 3 years, working with Stan Lee, and he knows all the CEOs. He works with the CEOs of all the biggest comic book companies in the world, and so we talk about this frequently. And we know that he says, like, all these companies, they're interested in NFTs, they're interested in the technology. They don't want anything to do with Bored Apes and all the degens, but they know the technology is really promising. And so one of the big hurdles is, of course, the blockchain problem of being able to handle the volume that mainstream requires, right? They don't have to worry about this stuff, when they just do everything with Amazon with standard huge databases. So basically, Waterfall solves one of the biggest problems that is preventing mainstream adoption of anime, manga, and comics. And so that's something that's just very exciting to me, is that once we get this going with Waterfall, then I'll be able to go back to my to Ken, who's the guy that used to work at Marvel, and we'll be able to pitch this to the big companies and the CEOs he knows. It's going to take a while. Like realistically, it's going to take a while. But that's kind of, for people listening, that's kind of exciting. You're very, very early in this. You're going to be able, because you heard about this, you're going to be able to pick up all of our number one issues, number two, and get things very early before mainstream has heard about them. While it's still a little bit complicated and difficult compared to the way it probably will be in 2 or 3 years. And you'll be able to get the stuff early, and the stories are good. The characters are a lot of fun, and you'll see the comic is really spectacularly cool. Everyone, I show this to people almost every day, and people, their eyes pop out of their head because they haven't seen anything of this type of quality before. My video froze. Hopefully you can still see me. But people haven't seen this type of quality of products in the Web3 space. It just, people are always focusing on the speculation and marketing and building hype, but they're never focusing on building a really high quality product, which we've done. We've been doing this since 2020, I think. So we've had 4 years into building this technology. We've been sitting on comic book art that's been ready for over 2 years, but we just haven't been able to get all the pieces together to get all of the presentation right, because we want to be able to sell these Web3 comics directly in Discord, directly in Telegram, which we can do right now. And we want people to be able to get them within seconds and be able to pay for them with a credit card or with crypto. We had to build a gigantic stack of different pieces of technology to solve all of these problems and fit them all together at the same time. And having great blockchains to launch on, like Waterfall, is sort of the last thing that I think is really important. And it's been difficult because a lot of the chains, like, they all struggle to find real users, right? Unless it's just some sort of gambling speculation, it's hard for them to get real users. Even like gaming, it's almost every single Web3 game fails. We have a really good game, by the way, that isn't failing, that has 200 people or more every day playing it, and it's growing organically. We've also taken 4 years to build that. That's called Siege Worlds, and it's based on the second sort of comic book series after Starblind that we're releasing. So we're really doing things, I think, the right way. Doing it the right way is not necessarily rewarded with this sort of speculative hype economy that Web3 is, but I think it's just a matter of time, and we're very, very close now to mainstream coming in because of what's happening with the U.S. government and all the stuff, really amazing stuff that's going to happen and even be announced, I think, in the next couple of months, that the U.S. government will be doing to support blockchain use around the world. I think that a lot of people's eyes will be opened up to the potential of blockchain, and mainstream will be coming in shortly behind that. So I'm very bullish on Waterfall and the projects that we're doing, because I feel like it all the stars lining right now to make this work, and when all these people come in, they're going to be looking for high quality products, and that's what we have. Like I said, I could talk all day, so just interrupt me anytime with more questions.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I saw your comics, and that's obvious that you put your soul into creating them. They are so eye-catching, and like you said, high quality. It's really obvious. And thank you, by the way, for choosing Waterfall, because that's the first example of cooperating with artists, and that's really fascinating. But if we are talking from network perspective, Sergey, how does Waterfall network architecture improve scalability? How does it reduce gas fees and eliminate delays compared to other traditional blockchains?
So, yeah, thank you for this question. And again, hello everyone. My name is Sergey Gribnik. I'm the head of research of this project. Today I'm without camera as I'm sick, and that's why I will be slightly, my presence on this AMA is slightly preserved, but I'm still here and I look the same as you can see me on the previous AMAs and the recordings. So I wanted to tell actually a little bit about the background of our relationships with Jeff, how it started, because it is relevant to what we're talking about. So, well, first of all, I need to tell that, this kind of, Jeff touched this topic, collectibles versus, something else, and potential, appreciation of value which present in the collectibles world. You need to pay attention to the phrase he said that no appreciation of value is promised, and second, basically do your own research about the status of whatever of basically of any projects on the ecosystem, because this is a separate project. This is not us. But what I can say, that I know Jeff from the very beginning of Waterfall, even before Waterfall wasn't called Waterfall, but the concept was already there, and we actually, one of the first cases was to create a lot of NFTs for Jeff. Jeff is a very talented person. And for his ideas, there was a lot of great ideas, and for his ideas, he needed to create a lot of NFTs. And at that time, there was the cost of creation of NFT on Ethereum was like $200 or something, I think. And yeah, it was ridiculously expensive if you even talking about, let's say, creation of 10,000 NFTs. So for Waterfall, we designed Waterfall for this use case at that time. In particular, so we created actually a simplified functionality for creation of tokens, and basically you don't need to kind of do the entire smart contract. You need to use the special transaction with included metadata about it, so it reduces the fees on Waterfall itself, and plus Waterfall has low fees in general. Basically the DAG structure allows to scale with the network growth. So with the network load growth, so basically auction is still low even when the network grows. Of course, everything is limited by something, but the scalability of this in Waterfall is much higher than let's say average project on the market. So also basically again example. We recently sent, I think, a batch of 29 transactions or 28, something like that. So let's say around 30 from smart contract, right? So 29 batch of 29 transactions, smart contract transactions, actually costed less than a fraction of a cent. And actually it was probably 0.1 cent or 0.2 cents if we will reflect the if we will convert Waterfall to its market price, etc. So basically what I'm saying is It is very inexpensive to operate with the on the network. We also support projects with providing them with some potential grants for them to cover the fees, to cover some other costs affiliated with utilization of the network for their operations. And we are welcoming. And despite I said that you need to do your own research, we very much like what Jeff does. And we think that this is good, but you need to understand that you need to do your own research. But we actually like the project, and we definitely think that it has a good future. This is it on my end. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. So my next question is, are Starblind NFTs interoperable with other NFT ecosystems, such as marketplaces or gaming platforms?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We're actually working on integrating Waterfall as well with our video game called Siege Worlds. And so one of the things that's great about Web3, and I was talking about how comics need to be rethought for the Web3 world, right? And not just a JPEG of a bunch of pages, right? And so what we're doing is making it so, for example, our comics have different tiers. Each one has a different cover with different characters, with different traits on those characters. So everyone is unique, but there could be special ones, or there could be tiers that you can get to that then unlock special things in the game. So, for example, the Waterfall comic has 9 tiers, starting from common. It goes all the way up to apocalyptic, and you can forge them. So if you have 2 commons, you can forge them together, and you have a chance to get a higher tier. You're guaranteed at least 1 tier higher, but you could go all the way up to tier 9, which is apocalyptic. So we can do something like, if you have a tier 5 or above in your wallet, then when you go and play the video game, then it may unlock a VIP area, or it makes you give 10% better damage, or it does something like this. Like right now, we made it with Waterfall. We integrate it with Wax, with Wax as part of our grant. They wanted us to do this, where if the owner of the person that's playing, if they have an Alien World shovel in their Wax wallet that's connected to the game, then they get 10% more coin drops when they shoot the monsters. So we can do this kind of thing, and we haven't figured out exactly what we're going to do with Waterfall yet, but that's part of the fun of making it a digital collectible, is that not only is there a higher tier, but the tier actually gives you some sort of use case. People always ask that, well, like, why do I really want a higher tier? For some people, that's enough. It's a collectible, right? People will buy collectibles, like stamps or whatever, just because it's fun to collect stuff and accumulate and try to get series and stuff. But what's cool about Web3 is that you can gives these things powers, use cases based on tiers or based on rare traits of some kind. So you could imagine, for example, that maybe 1 in 100 of the comics that you get has a special cover. And if you have that special cover, then you can play a special character that requires you to own that. So, and that character maybe can do something that others can't. Maybe it has a flamethrower or something that's really cool that everybody wants. So if you think cleverly about how to do this, you can generate a desire for people to collect or buy or forge, and you can basically create value for this. And it's like that with any type of collectible. If you really understand collectibles, you start to understand that people like something that's different, that somehow is fun and interesting. And the community sort of assigns that value. With human beings, it's always a community that makes anything valuable. And just even like the US dollar, we all know that those of us in blockchain know that the US dollar is not backed by anything but a collective belief that it's valuable. And so we agree to give it a value and use it. Then we exchange it with each other. Well, digital collectibles are not that different than that. So like I said, we could make something that 1 in 100 comics has a special character that's holding a flamethrower on the cover. If you own that comic, then that's the only way to use the flamethrower weapon within the game, which is really fun because the flamethrower is a fun weapon to use. And then other people see you with a flamethrower and they're like, well, how do I get a flamethrower? Like, oh, well, you got to go buy this comic. Well, you can't just buy the comic, but you also get this special comic. and then the people will buy multiple ones. So in our last launch, the average person that was buying our comics, when we did, it was Starblind Zero. It was like a test comic we did at the Alien Worlds. The average person ended up buying 20 of the same comic, and some people bought over 100 just so they could forge them, and they're trying to get the rare ones, and they're all sharing the different covers with each other. So we created a system that works very well with human physiology and biochemistry to get people excited to collect and buy more. And so you'll see that with the waterfall. Those of you who are watching, I hope everybody will come and buy at least one. You'll see everybody will have a different cover, and people will hopefully be able to share them in the Discord and be able to post the covers that they're getting, which helps inspire more people. And I'll try to be there to participate and say, oh, this is really cool, and to point out what's rare. Because in the beginning, people don't really know what they got. And people are like, oh, is this special? Is this good? Is this, they don't really know. And so we have to kind of explain to people. And then the community kind of starts to set the value. And it's kind of like with Bored Apes, right? There's a rare Bored Ape that has blue fur. And somebody made the Blue Ape Club, their Blue Fur Ape Club or whatever. And so it's completely, contrived, right? Like there's no reason why a blue fur Bored Ape is going to be better than any other ape, but because somebody said it was and made a club around it, then it created FOMO and other people wanted one. And as soon as you learn about this, you were like, it's just human nature. You're like, well, I want one of those too, because I want to be in the cool kids club with the blue-skinned apes. So if you understand this type of thing, then you can build your entire ecosystem around it and build your products around it. And so that's what we've been doing. So as we launch this comic, which we'll be announcing very soon, the exact date, people will be able to come in and buy them, and they're all numbered, right? So we start with number 1 and we go up. And so some people will probably assign value to having not just a high tier, but also a low mint number. And so that's another way to assign value. And so at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of digital stuff on your screen, and the community gets to decide what they see as valuable and what isn't. And we don't do that as a company. We can encourage certain ways of thinking by creating use cases, but people may not want that use case, or they may find that they set value in a different way. I mean, you could imagine that like some famous influencer comes in and just says, hey, I love this story, and I'm going to give, anybody that has a Starblind #1 comic that only has this one character on it, because every character in the comic, every character has a certain percentage chance to appear on the cover. So there are going to be some very rare comics that only have one character of a specific type. And those will be extremely rare. So anybody could come in, because it's Web3, and create their own use case for that. They could, for example, we have this one character named Fluffer, who's like this 9 foot, almost 3 meter tall guy that looks kind of like a rabbit. He's actually based on a capybara. And people love this character that have read the comic. He's very funny and very strong, and people really like him. And so there's going to be a certain number of comics that only have Fluffer on the cover. And so I would not be surprised if the community decides that they all want those, or somebody just starts trying to buy them up. And because we have forging, when you forge comics, the supply is actually being reduced. So you take 2 comics and you end up with 1, and so 1 gets burned. And so that makes it that if somebody has a comic that has maybe only a Fluffer on it, they maybe don't want to forge this because they want to keep it, because they think, oh, it might be valuable someday. And so instead they'll go buy more so they can forge others. So we have all these sort of things that are built into the tokenomics of the comics to make it so people want to end up buying more. And like I said, we had, selling them for $3 each. The average person bought 20, and the comics they're only at 8 pages. So this one has more than 40 pages of story and another 10 or 20 pages of extra stuff about the universe and the characters. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm hoping that we get a lot of people buying them and speculating on them, and ultimately what we want is a community that isn't just talking about speculation and price, but is actually talking about the characters and speculating on what might happen to them, speculating their backstories. Every character, there's interesting things in the story that are unexplained. You'll be able to read through what they say about each other, you'll be able to read the character description pages of each character, and you'll be able to get only part of the story about each of these characters. And there's hints in here about what they may have been through in their lives, or maybe where they're going, that will hopefully get people interested in the story. And I'll be around, asking questions and dropping hints and stuff. And over time, as the story unfolds, we'll be able to fill in a lot of these mysteries, and we'll always be creating more. And that's what ultimately people want. They want to be entertained, and people love to be able to like have a mystery that unfolds in a good way, in a satisfying way. That's where great storytelling comes in. And we've spent a tremendous amount of time sort of making all of this happen for the Starblind universe. My video is frozen again, so hopefully you guys can see me.
We can see you.
So
yeah. By the way, I did want to mention we have another comic called Anastia that's based in Kiev, and I did this because Sergey was my friend early on, and I even have a character named Sergey that's one of the stars of the character of the comic. So I'm really excited. Yeah, so I'm really excited to launch this eventually with you guys. If I could have got it ready in time, I maybe would have launched it, because you guys are Ukrainian and the team is there. And I've talked to a bunch of friends in Ukraine, and they said, "Oh, well, comics aren't really much of a thing here." And I was like, "Well, maybe that's good. Maybe this, we could get some publicity in Ukraine. Like, hey, these people have made a bunch of made a whole story around a Ukrainian vampire character." And I have a lot of like the lore. I did a lot of research in Ukrainian folklore. So there's, I have so many old photos of Kiev and the surrounding area from 150 years ago, when this character was first born, although she's living in the modern world. And so for those of you that are familiar with Kiev, you'll actually see in the comic book some of the actual places in Kiev that we put in the comic. And it's really cool. And people love this kind of thing, right? Where you're really putting a lot of passion and energy into doing something that's cool. And I've never been to Ukraine. I keep saying, I'm going to go. I'm not too, worried about the situation as far as like having a bomb dropped on me. But I have thought a lot about, like, maybe I'll launch this comic and donate part of it to like help, orphans or something like this from the war. But I'm kind of looking for an opportunity there, and I think there's a really good opportunity there that maybe I should talk to you guys. And if you happen to know any good PR firms in Ukraine that might want to publicize this and get people buying. I mean, ultimately they're inexpensive, and we could even possibly, make it even a lot cheaper as a way of raising awareness. It's not about, it's just a story, and the character is part of our other existing universe. But because of meeting Sergey, I just became interested in Ukraine, because all the other amazing Ukrainians I've met over the years, I became interested in the country, and so I wanted to base one of the stories there. So I'll tell you guys more about that later. But it's called Anastia, which is kind of a derivation of Anastasia, right? But I made my own sort of version, because Anastia it's actually not commonly used the way Anastasia is. So that way people that hear about Anastia could find it by doing a Google search in the future. Because if I called it Anastasia, nobody would be able to find it. There's like a million things with that name, right?
Well, I recall we were discussing this we were talking about this, and I remember it was, it used to be Anastasia, yes. And then, well, this is how is Waterfall, by the way, yeah. Same thing. We it wasn't Waterfall, but we were already discussing it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember early on, Sergey and I were trying to come up, I was helping him come up with a name, and I had a lot of names, but as soon as Sergey came up with Waterfall, and it was immediately I was like, it's a really good name, and so it's stuck. Like I spent over the years, I've had to come up with names for so many things, and you try Google searching and looking at trademarks and stuff to see what's already used, looking at URLs for your website. You have to go through all of this. You come up with great names, and you always discover that somebody else has come up with something that's too similar, or they've trademarked it. But when it hits right, then you you know right away, like, oh, this one's really good. And Waterfall was like immediately struck me as a great name for the protocol based on its characteristics and sort of the Web3 vibe. So, and then this whole universe around water is forming, and Sergey and I've been talking about doing various projects. It always has the different sort of the water theme for them, and which is great. It's really nice to have a fun sort of theme. With Lightning, we kind of stick with the theme of electricity, right? So when I but a lot of people have done that. It's very hard to come up with anything that isn't already trademarked in your category, because people love Lightning and electricity and stuff. There's the Lightning Network on Bitcoin and that kind of thing. So trying to differentiate yourself in the market is difficult, and there's no prominent projects called Waterfall in Web3. So it's really it's a great name that I really, really love.
Thank you so much for these kind words. And yeah, well, I think we can go on and on about the history of how how the intersections of the projects. But I suggest let's stick to the plan, because the length of the AMAs, we actually realize that the longer it is, the less people are later watching it. So we are close to 1 hour, and 1 hour is probably the top time, and better to make it less. So Victoria, please, over to you. Please go ahead with the questions. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, thank you so much for that. And almost all of the questions were already answered. So my last question is, where do you see Web3 comics evolving in the next few years, and what is Lightning Works' role in that future? So your thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, the CEOs of all the top manga and comics are very aware of the potential of NFTs. They just really don't like the presentation, and they don't like the communities that are involved with these right now. And so they're waiting for somebody to show them a path forward that works for them. And for them, it needs to be, they don't want to have to deal with gas fees. They don't want to have to deal with all these different networks and all the complication. They can't be using MetaMask and all these kind of problems. Things just have to work. It needs to be like an iPhone, right, where you click a button and it works. And so Web3 is a really difficult time doing that. And we've spent a tremendous amount of our money and energy over the years trying to solve these problems, to realizing that the only way that we're going to be able to sell comics in Web3 is if we make it so that people can buy them without MetaMask, and they can just scan a QR code and put in a credit card, but they can also take those comics, and if they want to sell it, they can get it back onto their credit card, but it's all blockchain. And at the same time, you want to kind of pull them into Web3, you want to pull them into blockchain, but you want to make that process fun and interesting and make it easy for them. So they're feeling like they're learning, and they feel cool because they're like, they have their first NFT or they have their first crypto, right? People really feel cool when they get this. We went to New York Comic Con, we had a booth there, and we gave away NFTs, Lightning Works NFTs there, and almost everybody walked away from it realizing that NFTs were not as hard as they believed. They could actually do this, and their users could do this as well, because they already had it in their mind that this stuff was too complicated and it was only for nerds, right? And so when we showed them, like, oh, this is really easy, you just scan this QR code and a Telegram wallet pops up within 5 seconds, and you already have your NFT in it. That's how easy we made it. It's the easiest and best system in the whole world that we built. We built it just to solve this problem. We didn't build it for the wallet. We built it so that we could just sell comic books, right? And NFTs and this kind of stuff for video games, because that's what we really wanted to do. Well, we ended up solving this gigantic problem at the same time and making it really easy. So people are always really shocked. People would come to our booth and we would say, hey, just scan this and get your first NFT. And then people scan it, and they're like, 5 seconds later, they're looking at their NFT in their wallet, and they're like, really, I own this, And then they start asking the questions we want them to ask. Well, like, now what do I do with this, and how do I sell it, and can I send this to a friend? And these are the type of questions they want to ask. We don't want them to be asking questions about, how to use MetaMask and these kind of things, which just turns people off from digital collectibles as a thing, right? So the future of all of this is basically making it really easy, getting it all working really beautifully, having enough traction of actual users that are excited about it, and then we'll take it directly to the CEOs of all of these entertainment companies, and we already have, a lot of them know about us already. I talk occasionally to Dan Didio, who was the head of DC Comic for 10 years. I've talked to John Nee, who's a publisher of Marvel. Like I said, I talked to the head of Comixology, which Amazon bought to deliver comics, and it didn't work. And so I've talked to a lot of these people, and there's one way or another sort of waiting for Lightning Works to kind of deliver on all the promises I've made over the years. And they're always like, yeah, keep me informed. But there's a lot of pieces in the puzzle to put together all at the same time. And meanwhile, you have Web3 has in the minds of the consumers, now it's all become about meme coins. It's become about Trump coin. It's about all these kind of weird things that keep happening that deflect from people understanding that this is a really viable and valuable technology that solves a real problem of collectible ownership that is not done in any other way. So for us, it's all about getting all the pieces together, making sure it flows really well. It has to work on your phone, it has to work on desktop, Mac, PC, everything else. And it just needs to be simple buttons with a very simple UX and UI so that people are enjoying the product and not fighting with the technology. Once we have that, then we'll be able to take it directly to all the right people in these big digital entertainment companies and say, hey, just plug in your IP, your stories, your characters. We're going to make it really easy. And your fans that are existing are going to be able to buy something, enjoy it, and you'll make money from it. So that's how it will flow.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. So that's all the questions I have at the moment. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I believe no questions at the moment. So once again, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. Sergey, thank you so much as well. And this MA session has been recorded, and the recording will be published on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So everyone who missed it will be able to watch it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Please.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Victoria, for having us, and thank you for listening to. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, get well.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.